So it is a very interesting moment of history, I think. 75 years after the creation of the State of Israel. It's a generation, isn't it? Biblically, Israel is a mature state now, but we do see, I think, I'm concerned by the rise of anti-Semitism. I'm concerned by the rise of anti-Zionism. There's a more hatred. It's not just this issue, it's many issues, isn't it? It's about other biblical issues where you're for or you're against, and those who are against are very violently against. So if you're anti-Israel now, it's becoming on university campuses, in the public space, people are aggressive. I think there's a spiritual dimension to it. There are, reasons why these things are happening. From a legal perspective, I see it, the legal cases against Israel are becoming stronger. So in the international courts, Israel is being prosecuted, condemned in a way we've never seen before. And you could say, well, that's just law, that's just the courts, it doesn't matter. But I think it does matter because it kind of reflects an overall atmosphere and a political dynamic which is happening. At the same time, you see, I think, another perspective where those who stand up for God's truth are doing so. I think we're more and more in a minority now in the world. Christians are becoming in a minority, and Christians who support biblical principles are a minority of a minority. So we're going to be facing persecution, I think, ourselves as we go forward. I live in Europe, and I think the atmosphere in Europe is not going in the right direction. It's becoming potent. And it's fast, Tudor. It's going very fast. And I think we know this historically, things are going to move very fast. There's like a tipping point in history sometimes where things just go over the edge. And I'm pretty concerned we're coming close to that precipice. So for me, it's a time of being ready, getting prepared spiritually, as you can for what is coming. But God is with us, God is in history. We don't have to be afraid. We don't have to worry. I don't think Israel should worry. But times are going to get tough, I think. So today, since 1945, we have the United Nations. It was created at the end of the Second World War. It replaced the League of Nations. And you have 193 member states of the United Nations, and they're arranged in groups, in geographic groups. So you have the African nations, you have what's known as Western European nations together, you have the Soviet nations, you have South America and so forth, Asian nations, but they're also arranged in groups which represent religion. So the Islamic nations are organized in the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. 56 nations are in the OIC. You have the non-aligned movement. So there are all those post-colonial countries which have a very anti-Western agenda. You have the European Union. 27 member states are represented into the UN. So these groups of nations also drive the agenda of the UN. Ever since the 1970s, you have the Arab League as well, very important. And the Arab League with the OIC, the Islamic nations, have driven the agenda of criticizing and condemning Israel and pushing the Palestinian case. It's very deliberate, it's very organized. So what they do is they draft resolutions. They're put into the OIC or the Arab League. They adopt these resolutions. These are then put to the General Assembly. And then 1 or 2 states have to be the nominating states that put this up. And then there's a vote on the resolution, or they'll usually go through committees, 2 or 3 committees before they get to the General Assembly. And at the end of the day, you get a General Assembly resolution where states vote for or against, or they abstain, or they don't vote, or they don't even appear in the meeting. So you can have resolutions that are passed by less than half the number of member states, but they're passed as resolutions because not enough states oppose them. This is what happens a lot in the case of Israel. These resolutions, which are, these are every day, every month, every year, these are more and more resolutions. There are many of them, but they're usually passed by like 80 or 90 states. So it's like half the UN. And the other half, they vote against or they just abstain from voting. So that's why these anti-Israel states always get they get an automatic majority to pass the resolutions. And these resolutions then become a kind of international law. Everybody says, well, the UN says, therefore, which is not true because the UN is a political body. It doesn't make law. UN resolutions are not legally binding documents. Even Security Council resolutions are not binding, most of them. So there's a lot of politics. Votes are bought, literally. The Arab nations are buying states. They promise them money, so they will vote in favor of what they want. So they trade votes on different issues. It's a kind of marketplace for political and ideological agendas. Anti-Semitism is it's something you can't quite touch, isn't it? It's a spirit that drives people. I think maybe for different reasons, a kind of a hatred or an opposition to the Jewish people. I think nobody really understands why this happens, but it manifests itself in many different ways. And I don't think that you can fight it through law. I don't think law really is the best tool for fighting against these things. It can be important to, I think, stand up against the unfair and the unbalanced criticism of Israel, which becomes a kind of, I think, anti-Semitism. I think anti-Zionism, condemnation of the state of Israel unreasonably is a kind of anti-Semitism. So the law does have something to say about that, I think. So we put those legal arguments. We're not going to change the way people think. But I think you raise a banner, you make a powerful statement, and if it's backed up by law, then it has an extra dimension. And I think it's important that we use our legal systems well. Remember, again, the Jewish people in Israel are very isolated. It's hard for them to defend themselves. Of course, if I condemn you for being a murderer or a rapist or a thief, you can defend yourself, but you're on your own, But if you have witnesses, if you have people around you who say, Tudor is a good guy. He's not perfect, but he's not a thief. He's not a criminal. I think that's what we have to do as well in the legal institutions. Everybody talks about the occupied Palestinian territories, the OPT, occupied Palestinian territories. What are we talking about? Okay, I think the best way to explain is very briefly that this whole area that was called Palestine for 2,000 years, we now know, if you look at the map, it's the state of Israel and what's called the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Now, before 1948, there was a thing called the Mandate for Palestine. So this was the system created after the fall of the Ottoman Empire to say that Palestine as a whole should become a homeland for the Jewish people. So it's everything west of the Jordan River, also east of the Jordan River. In biblical terms, it's Judea and Samaria. It's the biblical area where the tribes of Israel lived. It was under Roman occupation, and it was under Babylonian and the Greeks and the Byzantines and everybody else. But it was one area. It was one area. It wasn't divided. The Arabs didn't like the idea of the Jewish homeland. So when Israel was created in May 1948, they all attacked Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, even Saudi Arabia. They attacked this new state of Israel. And it was a miracle that the Jews survived. And they kept control. The Jews had control of a small part of this big area of Palestine. Jordan occupied a large area, which they then called the West Bank of the Jordan River, or the West Bank of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Egypt occupied the Gaza Strip. Syria occupied the Golan Heights. So these Arab nations were occupying territory which had been part of the Mandate for Palestine, which was intended for the Jewish homeland. Okay, Israel survived, it existed, it accepted that situation, was prepared to live with it and just, build up its existence and the state of Israel. And then in 1967, so less than 20 years after the state of Israel was created, they attacked again Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, attacking this state of Israel. Why? To destroy it. Israel won that war. Not only did they win the war, they won back a whole lot of territory. That whole West Bank became under Israeli control. The Sinai Desert, they took control of. The Gaza Strip. And the world then said, oh, then you are occupying Israel, you are occupying Arab territory. So this whole idea of occupation came into existence. Now, there is a law about occupation. It comes back way from even before the First World War. It's called the law of belligerent occupation, which is fine. It just says when one state occupies territory in a conflict situation, then it has to respect the sovereignty of the state that has been conquered or defeated or that has been pushed out of the territory. And it has to look after the people of that territory. That's what that law is intended to do. So Israel said, well, we'll look after the people. Of course, we'll look after the Arab Palestinians, but we don't accept that Jordan had sovereignty over the West Bank, because they illegally had attacked. We don't accept that Egypt had sovereignty over the Gaza Strip. We don't accept that Syria had sovereignty over the Golan Heights. So yes, we're prepared to call it occupied, but no, we don't accept their sovereignty. So this is where the confusion has come in. I just want people to understand that the law of occupation, there's nothing illegal about occupation. There are many occupations in the world. Turkey is occupying northern Cyprus. Russia is occupying the Crimea. Morocco is occupying the Western Sahara. Now, acquiring territory by aggression is illegal. You cannot invade a territory. What Russia is doing in the Ukraine is illegal. and therefore their occupation becomes illegal. So Jordan's occupation of the West Bank was illegal because their attack was illegal. But when Israel won the territories in 1967, there was nothing illegal about it. They were fighting a defensive war. Everybody accepted that in 1967. So Israel is perfectly entitled to keep control of the territories and negotiate with Jordan, with Egypt, as it has done. Peace treaties with Egypt, peace treaty with Jordan, and now it's trying to reach a peace treaty with the Palestinians. So there's nothing illegal about their occupation. But it does mean that you have to treat the civilians well. Now, then we get to the next question. Is Israel treating the Palestinians well? Well, we had the Oslo agreements, which set up a division between the Palestinian areas and the Jewish areas. That's what the Palestinians wanted. They don't want to live with the Jews, they want to live separately. So we created areas A and B in the West Bank. And the whole idea was that there would be more negotiations leading to a final agreement. It's never happened. So we're in this situation where it's an interim agreement. Now, can I just go on to settlements? Because Jews from Israel and non-Jews are also living in these territories. Why? Because they consider that this is Judea and Samaria, which they believe is their biblical heartland. So many living in Eastern Jerusalem, they're living outside what is known as the Green Line, in communities, in towns, in cities, and we call them settlements. Now, are settlements illegal? Well, there's no law which says that settlements are illegal. What is illegal is for Israel to transfer or deport its population into occupied territory. And the argument that people make is that Israel is moving these people into these occupied territory in order to prevent the Palestinians having their state, which is not true. The Jews living in these territories are not preventing a Palestinian state. No reason why Jews living there is preventing a Palestinian state, just like Arabs living in Israel does not prevent the creation of the Jewish state. So there's no reason why you can't have an Arab state of Palestine with Jews living there. So I think the whole argument about settlements being illegal is a false one, because Israel hasn't moved them there. There's no law against living in another territory. If a German can go and live in the Netherlands, or a Romanian can go and live in Hungary, that's not illegal. So why should it be illegal for a Jew to live in this other territory, even if it belongs to the Arabs, which I don't think it does? It doesn't mean Jews can't live there. And there are many other arguments.